Okay, so we'll be starting off today's show the same way we start off every Tuesday show of the NFL season here on the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast, and that is with our 10 main takeaways of the previous week. So, boys, without further ado, it's week 10. Hit the music. Takeaway number 1. The Rams are a really good football team, and I was so impressed with the way they came out and handled their business on Sunday against the Seattle Seahawks. Besides quarterback, what did the Seahawks do better than the Rams? Nothing. Right now, I think Sean McVay is a better coach than Pete Carroll. Right now, I think the Rams' defense is significantly better than Seattle's, and Sean McVay deserves a lot of credit for what he's been able to do with this Los Angeles Rams team. It's funny because last year, there were a lot of people that hopped off the Rams bandwagon. If you remember, the previous year, the Rams went to the Super Bowl, albeit they couldn't score a point against the New England Patriots. And they lost a lot of games last year that they were not really expected to lose. Todd Gurley wasn't really able to get the run game going at all. They ultimately cut him. Their offensive line really struggled. Their defense was inconsistent. This is all last year, and they still finished 9-7. Sean McVay has consistently shown you the ability to win games since he's become the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams. And I do think a lot of times there are some people around the NFL who they try to move off Sean McVay and they'll be like, oh, Kyle Shanahan, that's the next big thing in terms of a head coach. There are other guys, Matt Nagy in Chicago, a bunch of guys that teams will hire to be their offensive guru, even Adam Gase in New York, if you want to consider him that, the quote-unquote quarterback whisperer. But Sean McVay has done an awesome job with this Rams team. They're one of the better teams in the NFL, and they are a really good football team. Takeaway number 2, another really good football team, the Las Vegas Raiders. I am so impressed with what Jon Gruden and Derek Carr have been able to do with this Raiders squad. And to be honest, a couple weeks ago, when they went into Kansas City and beat the Chiefs, it was a very good win. But I thought, okay, as great of a win as that was, isn't it a total Raider thing to do to kind of just choke down the stretch and not make the playoffs? And I thought that was possible just because I did think their defense was one of the 5 worst units in the league. Now, their defense isn't good, but it has made plays. And on Sunday against Drew Lock, they had a big reason as to why they won that game. They forced 5 turnovers on the Denver Broncos, including 2 interceptions by the veteran safety Jeff Heath, and I do feel like Jon Gruden does have these Raiders buying in. Early in the season, the Raiders had one of the hardest schedules in football. Listen to the way they started their season. At Carolina, win. Home against the Saints, win. At the Patriots when they were playing well, loss. Home against the Bills, loss. So they're 2-2. They then go to Kansas City and win, 3-2. Lose to the Bucs at home, fine, 3-3. Go to Cleveland and win. Go to the Chargers and win. Beat Denver at home. And now the Las Vegas Raiders are 6-3, going into this Sunday night's huge matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to be really excited for this one. Chiefs-Raiders hasn't really had this big-time buzz in a while when you consider just how big of a rivalry it really is. So I'm going to be really excited for that game. Chiefs and Raiders, Sunday Night Football. And Jon Gruden, to me, has the Raiders looking like a playoff team. Derek Carr, I'll say it, is playing the best football of his career right now. And better than when he almost won MVP a couple years ago, because he has these Raiders in legitimate playoff race, and the AFC in that mid-tier wildcard tier is very, very good. Shout out to Jon Gruden and the Raiders. Takeaway number 3. Props to Joe Judge and the New York Giants. I think they are a very similar version to what the Miami Dolphins were last year. And if you watch the New York Giants up close this season, every game is close. They easily could have way more than 3 wins right now. And even though I predicted the Philadelphia Eagles to win yesterday, you guys know that's just because I'm high on Carson Wentz. And ultimately, over the last couple weeks, Carson Wentz hasn't really made me look that good. And he really struggled against the New York Giants yesterday. And that was with a running game. Now, with the Giants, I actually think their defense is legitimately good. And everyone kills Dave Gettleman, the GM of the Giants. And I understand why. If I was him, I wouldn't have taken Saquon Barkley with that number 2 pick. I get it. But at the same time, he won that Odell Beckham trade. getting Peppers and Kevin Zeitler and a draft pick that turned into Dexter Lawrence, who's a really good player on that defensive line, I think Dave Gettleman won that trade. Bringing in James Bradbury, he's one of the 2 or 3 best corners in the NFL right now. So I do think Dave Gettleman has done some good things as GM as the New York Giants. I just think the Giants actually have a coach that could be pretty good. And it's funny because picking coaches are like flipping a coin. Joe Judge was the special teams coordinator for the New England Patriots. Honestly, did anyone ever heard of him before this season? Because to be honest, I haven't. And what he's been able to do so far this season with the New York Giants has been a great job by him. You could really tell that he has the locker room bought in. And the Giants somehow, some way, are right in the race for that NFC East title. I feel like it's been way too long since we've discussed the New York Football Giants as a legitimate contender. So I'm happy for them. They are right in this NFC East mix. Takeaway number 4. That DeAndre Hopkins catch, I just don't have any words for it. And we're going to get into the NFC West a little bit later in the show. But that DeAndre Hopkins catch, as impressive as it was and as impressive as the throw was by Kyler Murray, I think that win on Sunday against the Bills could have easily changed the trajectory of the Arizona Cardinals season. And let me explain why. So far this season, the Cardinals have actually lost a couple games that I think they should have won. As good of a season as they've had, they dropped a game at home to the Detroit Lions, so I think significantly they're a better football team. They lost a game on the road against Carolina, who's a good rebuilding team. They're tough. I understand they almost beat Kansas City, but at the same time, I think that's a game Arizona should easily win. They lost on the road to Carolina. And 2 weeks ago against the Dolphins, I understand the Dolphins are a really good team, great story, but if you watch that game, to me at least, Arizona really did look like the better team, and I do think coaching ultimately cost them. But I do think if the Cardinals would have lost this game to the Bills, we'd be kind of banging that same tune of the drum. I don't trust Cliff Kingsbury as a coach, and I feel like there are going to be a lot of people who overreact to that Cardinal win on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills, but I'm not going to be one of them. For me, as impressive as the win was and as impressive Kyler Murray is, I think the Cardinals are 1 year away. And they're showing signs of it. If they would have lost that game to the Buffalo Bills on Sunday, instead of drooling over the Kyler to DeAndre Hopkins touchdown, we'd be bashing Cliff Kingsbury for his poor coaching decisions on Sunday. So that's ultimately, for me, going to be one of the bigger keys with this Arizona Cardinal team. Can they kind of get over those flaws that I think right now have made me concerned about them being a possible contender in the NFC? It was a great catch by Hopkins, but I want to see them be more consistent and better. Takeaway number 5. How good is it to see my guy, Ben Roethlisberger, back on the field, just swinging the football all over the place? And it's funny because going into Sunday's game, there were actually a lot of people who were picking the Cincinnati Bengals to go into Heinz Field and beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. There were plenty of people saying, oh, the Steelers barely went into Dallas and win. They're a fraud, even though they're undefeated. They could lose to anyone. They're going to lose to Joe Exotic on Sunday and the Bengals. How's that going? Ben Roethlisberger, after a week of not even practicing because of COVID tracing, went on the field on Sunday and played his best game of the season. And there have been many people, me included, that have been on their show and say, as good as the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is, their offense just isn't dynamic enough, and that's why I don't consider them to be a real contender in the AFC. And going into this game, I agreed with that for the most part. And I understand it's only the Cincinnati Bengals, so no performance against Cincinnati should really change your opinion, especially when you're evaluating it on their defense. But at the same time, if Ben Roethlisberger can play anywhere close to that, the Steelers are going to be a really tough team to beat, especially if a possible AFC Championship game matchup with the Chiefs is at Heinz Field. I still think the Steelers' defense is the best defense in football, even without Devin Bush. It's that good, and they just make big play after big play. But at the same time, on Sunday against the Bengals, you saw Big Ben really just air it out and feed so many of his different receivers. Deontay Johnson, Eric Ebron, James Washington. Juju has been playing really well over the last couple weeks, and Pittsburgh couldn't stop the run in this game. They couldn't get the running game going in this game, and still they were able to win by a significant margin just because really of their defense and Ben Roethlisberger. And Mike Tomlin deserves credit. He's done one of the better coaching jobs in the league this year, and this is a guy, for me, that I am pretty hard on usually, but he deserves some props. Shout out to the Steelers. Takeaway number 6. The Indianapolis Colts are a legitimate contender in the AFC, and I feel like when I say they're a legitimate contender, I'm gonna make that meaning they're on the same tier as a Baltimore or a Miami or a Raiders or a Colts or a Titans. Excuse me. I think the Colts are right below that top tier with Pittsburgh and Kansas City, and I'm not saying they would beat Kansas City, but I would be very curious to see what a possible Colt Chief matchup would look like, just because I think the Colts defense could hold their own against Kansas City, which is something not a lot of other defenses could say in this NFL. On Thursday Night Football against the Tennessee Titans, they pitched a shutout in the second half, and in that kind of spot where your team needs a win as badly as possible against a division team on the road in prime time, the Colts were able to shut out the Titans in the second half. Kamiko Toure just stopping the run. Frank Reich, Matt Eberflus, that dude is going to be a coach in the league someday soon. I give the Colts a lot of credit for somehow, some way, going on the road and pulling out that victory. And Phillip Rivers, as much as I've ripped on him, as much as I've said he's washed, and I still think he is, he has played better over the last couple weeks. He was swinging the ball on Thursday night against the Tennessee Titans, hitting open receiver after open receiver, using the play action. I was really impressed with what the young receiver on the Colts, Michael Pittman, the second-round pick from USC, I was very impressed with what he was able to do. Nyheim Hines as well. We all know the Colts have one of the best offensive lines in the league. We all know the Colts have one of the best defenses in the league, and I think we all know also that the Colts are a very well-coached team. It all comes down to the quarterback spot, and I think 1-53, that roster is very, very dangerous. Respect to the Indianapolis Colts for their win on Thursday night against the Titans. Takeaway number 7, no one is fixing the Chicago Bears offense. There were a bunch of people earlier in the season that were blaming Matt Nagy, and they were blaming Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky and the weapons, or making up excuses, and they were saying, oh, Bill Lazor, he's going to be the guy that will get the job done for this offense because Matt Nagy is the problem, and he's that bad. Well, the bottom line is, folks, the Chicago Bears offense is just unfixable. The personnel is not good. And all you need to know is, last night in the second half, the Bears, who, keep in mind, they started off the quarter with a bunch of momentum. Cordero Patterson, kick return touchdown, and then for the rest of the second half, they have 1 first down and 14 yards in total? What? If you're an NFL team in 2020, that can't happen. Against the Minnesota Viking defense, who can't stop anyone, the Bears also couldn't convert on third down at all against the Tennessee Titans 2 weeks ago, who is the worst third down defense in the NFL. And when the Bears played Carolina, the worst passing defense in the NFL, their passing game couldn't get going at all. Besides Allen Robinson, I'm not really sure if there's anyone on this Bears offense that's worth keeping. And I gotta be honest, I've been a Matt Nagy defender. I loved the work he was able to do during his first year, as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. But really, the last 2 years, it's been bad. And if this continues with this defense, I may move on. Because if I'm the Bears owner, you have to fire Ryan Pace, right? I understand he's made some good trades, but he was the same guy that drafted Mitchell Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes. I think we all know Mitchell Trubisky is not the answer. And if you fire the GM, I don't think Matt Nagy is that good of a coach where he forces you to keep him, even when you're hiring a new GM. And for that reason, if I'm the Bears, I think I'm looking for a new coach next season. Matt Nagy, it's not his fault entirely. He's been a little unlucky with the way the situation's gone down, and I do think he does deserve a chance to develop his own quarterback, but at the same time, after so much, I don't know how long it's worth it to keep him. So that's my takeaway. The Bears, just not a very good football team on the offensive side of the ball right now. Takeaway number 8. The Miami Dolphins look like a playoff team to me that could still very well win the AFC East. Miami's next 3 games are at Denver and then home against the Jets, at the Jets, and following that, they will host the Cincinnati Bengals. There's a very good chance the Miami Dolphins win all 3 of those games. And then listen to this. The next 4 games for Miami to end the season: home Kansas City, home New England, at the Raiders, at the Bills. I think the Dolphins are going to end their season going, give or take, 4-2, 5-1. And I believe in these guys. I believe in Brian Flores to have his team ready to play every single week possible. And in the AFC East race, you can make the argument that it's kind of similar to the NFC West, where probably Buffalo does have a little bit of an easier schedule, and Miami goes to Buffalo to end the season, which is not going to be an easy game. Plus, one thing I'll say about Buffalo that I didn't mention when I spoke about Arizona, that throw by Josh Allen to Stephon Diggs was the best throw of Josh Allen's career. So props to him for that. But at the same time, Miami right now, in the way they're playing, they're just not asking Tua to do that much. They have one of the better defenses in the league that scores, they take the ball away. They also had a block punt early in this game against the Chargers, which I think really set the tone early, and there was never a minute where I ever expected that the Miami Dolphins were going to lose that game, and Miami just out-schemed and out-coached the Chargers. It's that simple. Anthony Lynn, I say it every week on this show, he's got to go, man. He really does. Because every week, this is getting more and more embarrassing for the Chargers, just running the ball way too much in the first half when they were down by 14-plus points, and Justin Herbert deserves better. That head coach opening come this offseason should be very highly coveted, because if you ever get the opportunity to play with a guy like Justin Herbert and to coach him, I would take it. Takeaway number 9. I'm worried about the Baltimore Ravens. And I know there are going to be a lot of people who say, don't overreact to one game. It's a Sunday night going on the road in a monsoon against the Bill Belichick coach defense. But at the same time, if you listen to the show, I predicted the Patriots to win that game on Sunday. It really went the exact way I expected. And the scoreboard is going to show you that the game was a little closer than I think it actually was. And there was never really for a second, unless early in the game when the Ravens drove down the field and scored that touchdown, there was never really a second where I legitimately thought that the New England Patriots weren't winning that game. And Lamar Jackson was fine. He made some okay throws, especially on that last drive late in the game. But ultimately, this is just becoming a trend for the Baltimore Ravens. I totally understand that they were able to go into Indianapolis and win 2 weeks ago. But if you look at that game a little closely, it was the game changed on a BS interception call that Marcus Peters didn't even catch. That was the first time in Lamar Jackson's career that the Ravens won a game with him as quarterback when they were trailing at the half. And at the same time, wasn't everyone picking the Baltimore Ravens to just go into Foxborough and blow out the Patriots? Because everyone thought the Ravens were just significantly a better football team that was more talented with better players. And to be honest, they are. But I never trusted Lamar Jackson to go on the road against the Bill Belichick coach defense and win that game. He's that good. And if the Ravens, if they're not careful, and we're going to get into this later into the show as well, they are still in a little bit of jeopardy of missing the playoffs. The AFC wildcard picture is getting very, very crowded. And every game the Baltimore Ravens lose, if you're a Raven fan, I think you have to get more and more worried just because this offense isn't the same offense as last year, and it doesn't look anything close to it. They just need to improve a little bit game by game by the time the playoffs get here and execute their style of winning football in the playoffs, and then I'll feel a little bit better. But if you look at the Ravens' upcoming schedule, it's not easy. Sunday, they play the Titans at home. That is a monstrous game. They then will go to Pittsburgh on Thursday night, host Dallas, go to Cleveland, host Jacksonville, then host the Giants, and then go to Cincinnati. So the last 3 games are pretty easy for Baltimore, but I don't think they're winning the AFC North. The Steelers gained another gain on them. I don't trust the Ravens right now. I think they are very, very vulnerable. And then takeaway number 10, the Lions need to fire Matt Patricia. This guy's an absolute clown. The fact that these guys were up by multiple touchdowns, I believe it was 21, so 3 touchdowns, on the Washington football team, and they still needed a Matt Prater field goal from the parking lot, should tell you all you need to know about the current state of the Detroit Lions. I mean, what was that? The Washington football team has Alex Smith at quarterback. They can't score against anyone. And still, your vaunted defense, who, by the way, gave up 1 million points to Nick Foles in the Super Bowl, just gets absolutely scorched. And even though the Lions won, I mean, I can't take them seriously. They're 4-5. I think the worst thing for them to do would be 8-8 And if I'm them, I'm just blowing it all up. Get rid of Matt Patricia. Get rid of Dan Quinn. It's not Matthew Stafford's fault, but I think he would be better suited somewhere else and draft a quarterback and just rebuild. Because right now, I'm telling you, it is not working in Detroit. And it's crazy because just 3 seasons ago, the Detroit Lions finished with a record of 9-7 and fired Jim Caldwell because they thought that wasn't good enough. And now, over the last 3 years, Matt Patricia takes over and he cannot win nearly as many games as Jim Caldwell could have. Stafford, he's been all right at best. Kind of inconsistent, played all right against Washington, but this Washington football team could have easily won that game. If Prater misses that kick, we go to overtime, who knows what could have happened. And Washington has some playmakers. I think they blew an opportunity here because if they could have somehow, some way earned a win, they would have made their quest to winning the NFC East a little easier than most people would have expected. And the Washington football team, just like the Giants and just like the Eagles, still has a legitimate shot to win that division. So I was disappointed with really both teams in this game. I don't take the Lions seriously at all. They need to rebuild. The worst thing for them this season would be to go 8-8.